What's up guys, my name is Ace, and as we already know within Warzone, sniper rifles are an incredible tool that you should absolutely have on your loadouts, just because of how big the map is, how open it is, and how many situations you'll be in where you need to hit that really long shot. Combine that with the fact that with the AX50 and the HDR, you are guaranteed a one-shot kill to the head, even if the enemy has full armor, and this makes using one of these sniper rifles an absolute no-brainer for most people. Now, having said this, there is a lot of debate right now as to which sniper rifle is best to use within Warzone. Is it the AX50 or the HDR? So in today's video, we're going to be putting these side by side, focusing mainly just on the Warzone stats. This isn't necessarily a replacement for my gun guide series, but we're going to be breaking these down to find out which one is actually best to use within Warzone. So let's just hop right into it and cover some of the basic handling stats. The first handling stat that's extremely important with sniper rifles is our aim down sight time. This is actually a result I found very surprising with both the HDR and the AX50. Assuming you're using no attachments, they have the same aim down sight time at 617 milliseconds. I thought for sure the AX50 was aiming down sight a little bit faster than the HDR, but that's just not true. In fact, when we start adding attachments to slow down our aim down sight time, the HDR starts to gain an advantage over the AX50 in the aim down sight department. So one of the really common attachments to use on sniper rifles is the thermal sight. And as you can see, when you add this attachment, the HDR is actually aiming down sight just a little bit faster than the AX50. Then if we take it to the next level and we're using a thermal sight with the longest possible barrel attachment for each of these, because that's also quite common to use, once again, the HDR just aims down sight a little bit faster. So I was blown away by this. I never expected this at all. I don't know if it's just like the looks of the weapons, like the HDR looks like it would be a heavier gun to handle. And that's why I always thought that the AX50 aimed down sight a little faster, but it turns out I was wrong. Another handling stat that I find to be quite important within Warzone is how fast can you swap from one of these sniper rifles over to an assault rifle, for instance. And I just chose the M4 for my testing because that's just one of the most common guns in the entire game. And it turns out with this one, no matter which one of these sniper rifles you're using, they will swap over to the M4 in the same amount of time. Once again, if you would have asked me before doing this testing, I would have guessed that the AX50 was a little bit faster, but turns out that's just not true. Next up, I want to have a look at the different ranges for these guns, because if you look at the stat bars, it says that the HDR has a longer range value than the AX50, and while it is true that these technically do have a damage drop-off range, within Warzone, this almost never actually matters. It never really comes into play, but let's have a look at it anyways. With both of these sniper rifles, up close, they'll be dealing just over 100 damage anywhere in the torso or the shoulders. However, once you get to their damage drop-off point, they will drop down to 99 damage in these areas. So the whole reason behind this, it's designed to make it so you have to hit a headshot against an enemy that just has full health but no armor, so it's designed more for regular multiplayer. And this damage drop-off point for the AX50 is 75 meters, whereas for the HDR, it's 100 meters. Now, the reason I say that this doesn't really matter too much within Warzone is, first off, that little window of range between 75 and 100 meters, that's just a tiny window when you factor in the vast variety of ranges you're going to be challenging people in throughout a match. So the chance that your target is going to be exactly between 75 and 100 meters is already a little bit slim. But on top of that, when you start factoring armor into the equation, it doesn't really matter if you're dealing 99 damage or 102 damage. It's basically the same thing. So when it comes to the actual damage range drop-off, technically speaking, the HDR is also better in this area, but it's not really going to make a difference most of the time. The thing that really does make a big difference, though, when we're talking about ranges is going to be our bullet velocity as well as the amount of bullet drop that we get. So let's start it off with bullet velocity, and keep in mind this is something that is really difficult to test with super great accuracy, just because there are way too many limitations going on here and everything is happening very quickly. But I'm sure many of us know that the HDR does have a slightly faster bullet velocity. But to illustrate this, what I did is I put the shortest barrel on both of these, so that will reduce our bullet velocity as much as possible on these. And then I put them side by side and I slowed it down extremely slow, and you can clearly see here that the HDR shot does connect a few frames before the AX50 shot. And this might seem really minor, but keep in mind, in this situation, I'm shooting at about 175 meters. And in Warzone, I've hit shots well over 300 meters. I've seen people hitting shots around like 500 meters, which is ridiculous. But as you get further and further away from your target, this gap is just going to grow between the HDR and the AX50 when it comes to bullet velocity. Now, bullet velocity is mainly important for tracking moving targets. If you got somebody that's moving, you're going to have to lead them less if you have a higher bullet velocity. So that's another advantage that goes to the HDR here. However, another factor with bullet velocity that's kind of intertwined with it is bullet drop. And as I'm sure many of you guys are already aware, the HDR has less bullet drop than the AX50. Now again, at 175 meters, it's really difficult to tell the difference here. I do notice that with the AX50 at this range, I have to aim just slightly higher than I would with the HDR in order to make sure I hit that headshot and not a body shot. But it's almost a negligible difference at this range. However, again, as you keep stretching further and further away, this gap will grow. And this means for extremely long shots, the HDR has the advantage when it comes to this, especially when you start looking at the long barrels. When you put the longest barrel on for each of these, with the HDR, even at like 300 meters, all you have to do is put the reticle right on their head and pull the trigger. You don't really have to account for bullet drop. You maybe want to aim towards the top of their head, but you're not aiming completely above your target by any means to drop the bullet in. Additionally, that does speed up your bullet velocity significantly, so it almost behaves like a hit scan on the HDR out to a few hundred meters. With the AX50, on the other hand, even with the longest barrel, if you're looking at like 200 plus meters, you still will have to be aiming a little bit high on your target. Now, you don't have to aim like way above their head or anything, but it is noticeably worse in the bullet drop department, and that's one of the primary reasons people have been leaning more towards the HDR rather than the AX50 within Warzone. Now, moving into our rate of fire, with both of these sniper rifles, they are quite slow because they're bolt action. With the AX50, we get a rate of fire of 48 rounds per minute, whereas the HDR is noticeably slower at 42.